Welcome to the Land, your bet sports betting show. Thursday night football, diving deep into this Falcons Bucs match. We got the Bucs on the road, plus 1.5 point dogs, looking at plus 110 on their money line and a 43.5 point total between two teams who have gone over in 7 of their last 10. I'm going to be going through all my picks for this game. Want to break down the team projections as well as some player props that we're looking at here. Kicking it off with the head-to-head in terms of the record on the season. 3-1 for the Bucs. Falcons somehow 2-2. Pulled out a squeaker last week without an offensive touchdown against the Saints. Against the spread, the Bucs really good here, 3-1 and 2-1 at home. Undefeated 1-0 on the road here against the spread. And then the Falcons not very good at home against the spread. They're 0-3 is the thing that really stands out to you about them. Should also note here, Atlanta is coming in with the 6th easiest strength of schedule so far on the young season, and the Bucs right in the middle of the pack at 16th. Falcons do have essentially the top 2 or 3 easiest strength of schedule in the league, according to preseason projections. So keep in mind, the Bucs have been playing much better comp with a better record against this Falcons squad. Looking at the offensive side of the field for the Bucs here, they're number 8 in overall EPA. So a really good offense so far this season, averaging 24 a game. Definitely a bit better with the pass than the rush. Baker's had a really good season so far and has used his running backs and tight ends really well so that they are able to keep that passing EPA up pretty high. 8th best in terms of drop back, expected points added per play. And the rushing yards, although they aren't really there on offense, they do show underlying metrics that they're pretty good at getting some push on the offensive line. For the Falcons on defense, not nearly as impressive. 23rd in overall EPA, and they are allowing the 6th highest success rate per play, regardless of run or pass, in the league so far this season. And they're really not getting any pressure on the quarterback. That's a major thing to consider here with this Falcons team. 4th fewest sacks in the league, 5th worst pressure percentage on the quarterback. So they are leaving their CBs out to dry, but they've done a really good job limiting yards after catch. So you'll see this Falcons defense give up a decent amount of receptions, but they do a good job closing the play after that. On the other side of the ball, it's taking Kirk Cousins a little bit of time here to get used to this Atlanta offense. And we've seen a lot of teams pressure him and his inability to move right now coming off of that Achilles tear, right? You saw last week, that kind of explains this Falcons offense. They won 26-24 without an offensive touchdown against the Saints. 2 TDs, one on special teams and one on defense that helped them get there to the win. But 21st in EPA per play, 22nd in first downs per game, and 29 in third down success. So they're not staying on the field. They're like put a couple drives together here and there. And then for the most part, it's a very stagnant offense and pretty inefficient when it gets into the red zone as well. Just 4 for 10 scoring once they get inside the 20. For that Bucs defense, not very good against the run. Like we said earlier, a big reason is those injuries on the defensive line. And if Vita Vea is not there, that's their run stuffer for sure. That's going to be a huge problem with their ability to stop Bijan and Tyler Allgeier. That said, they are getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback, as one would expect for this defense. 3rd highest blitz percentage, 5th best hurry percentage, forcing the ball out of the QB's hands. And Cousins, like I mentioned, has endured the 8th highest pressure rate for any quarterback so far this season. Looking at the injuries, though, we really need to key in on how much more the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be missing a ton of players than the Falcons will be. You look at this depth chart here, and it is riddled with injuries, especially to the wide receiver position. Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer both out. Mike Evans was limited in 2 straight days of practice, so problems there, and major problems on the offensive line when you're starting left tackle, you're starting center, and you're starting right tackle are all questionable. Looking like they may play. Luke Goedeke on the right, though, has been dealing with concussion symptoms since week 1. Not as likely to go as perhaps Tristan Wirfs and center Graham Barton. But the other thing here for the defense, even more injuries on the D-line. And this is a big reason why the Bucs have struggled so much to stop the run. Vita Vea missed a game. Logan Hall and Kalijah Cansey, both questionable as well, have also missed games. And their backup interior linemen and ends, which we know are super important in a 3-4 defense, the way that this Bucs team plays, especially to stop those run gaps. Well, William Golston is also questionable, and so is Greg Gaines. So they're very, very thin right now. And as we know, Antoine Winfield remains questionable since his injury in week 1. That's their best safety over at the free safety spot. For this Falcons team, not nearly as many injuries, but a few key injuries to some key guys. We got to monitor Bijan Robinson. He's definitely banged up. Probably looking at not going over for sure on his rushing stuff here in this one. Might take a look at him, though. Ray McLeod, also questionable. Would really love to have Ray in this game as a short yardage receiver against this Bucs pass rush, which is creates a ton of pressure. They blitz a ton, and you really want to have that short yardage guy, which Ray has been coming out of the slot all season so far for them. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Troy Anderson is the key to watch there. He is their leading tackler at right inside linebacker, and if he's unable to go, that's also going to open up the middle of the field even more for this Bucs offense. Quick reminder, guys, we are up about 8 units on the NFL season and doing really well in Thursday night football. So if you want to make sure you're not missing any of these picks, check out the link in the description of the video for the VIP Discord. Got a 50% discount for your first month going right now if you want to use the code that's in there. So check that out. Right now, I want to take you through some defense versus position stuff so you can see how the Bucs do against QBs, running backs, wide receivers. This is the most helpful site that I have in terms of simplicity. Link to this is also in the description of the video. It's just fantasy.nfl.com. Really helpful tool here. And a couple of things that I really want to show you for the Bucs defense and where they might be vulnerable. Starting with running back, interestingly, both these teams very bad at limiting running back receiving stuff and stats. So if you look at running back, you can choose the position at RB. I'm going to choose receptions to start and make it so that that's the number one thing here. And you can see going down running back receptions for both of these teams. Tampa Bay in the bottom 10, Atlanta as well. Interestingly, both these teams are pretty bad at limiting running back receptions and yards. Starting with the Bucs, you can see here I'm on running backs and I filtered it to receptions. That they give up the second most of those, and they give up the second most yards as well to the running back position. That makes a ton of sense when you think about the amount of pressure that they're bringing, how quickly the quarterback against them needs to get the ball out of his hands. The Falcons are also bad in terms of limiting receptions to the running back. They've seen a lot of receptions go against them here, bottom 10 as well in limiting running back receptions, but they're actually pretty good, once again, at finishing the play. You can see here when it comes to the yards to the running back, that's a lot lower, all the way down here inside the bottom 12 or so in terms of limiting running back receiving yards, despite giving up so many receptions. Taking a look at wide receivers real quick, you can see when it comes to receptions, the Falcons and Bucs both really bad in the bottom 10 here, limiting receptions to receivers on the season. But if you look at the yards, both similarly finish out the play. So you have to go much further down to find where you're going to see the Falcons giving up yards to wide receivers, and the Bucs even better here in the top 10 in terms of limiting yards to wide receivers, despite allowing so many receptions. These teams are also eerily similar when it comes to looking at the quarterback position and rushing yards for the quarterback. So in terms of attempts, they are first and second worst in terms of limiting attempts. So the quarterback is getting out of the pocket versus them. And if you look at the yards, same concept. Falcons giving up the most yards rushing to quarterbacks, and the Bucs most rushing yards to quarterback, second most. That said, don't expect Kirk Cousins to get out of the pocket very much. Baker Mayfield definitely has the capability of running a bit more. Might be worth a look at his rush yards. All right, getting into these play props here. Start with Chris Godwin. I do like his numbers for this game. If you look at the Atlanta defense, they've allowed 132 receiving yards per game to wide receivers, good for top 15 in the league. However, if you look at a little bit more closely at who is getting the receptions and the yards against this squad, it's the slot receiver. Third most catches to the slot wide receiver for this squad, and that is where Chris Godwin is playing. 65% of his routes are run from the slot. He's also been the first target for Baker Mayfield for most of this season already. A couple games where Evans obviously outshined him a bit, at least in the touchdowns. But when it comes to these yards and these receptions, he's getting a lot of the first looks from Baker Mayfield. So he's the first target and the first read that Baker's trying to make, to the tune of almost 34% of the time, which is good for 13th in the NFL of any receivers. You throw in the fact that we have two of the wide receivers for the Bucs not playing, as I mentioned, Trey Palmer, also Jalen McMillan, neither of them available. There's going to be more passing attempts to go around for Godwin, maybe some Sterling Shepard, obviously Mike Evans when he's in there, and perhaps some Cade Otton and Rachaad White. But from the slot, already pretty much Baker's preferred target on the season, very clearly, we got to go with Godwin. Overs in this game, can't fade that man. Other receivers here, I'm staying away from Mike Evans right now, mostly because of how good this Falcons team has been on the outside, limiting wide receiver yards and receptions. But I do think Cade Otton is at least worth a look here. He's only at 27.5 yards receiving, looking at this on outlier.bet. And you can see that in the last couple games, he's gotten over this. In the first two, nothing. And it's because of the targets. So I do think he's more likely to see a few more targets than he did in the first couple games. You can see here 2 and 2 in the first 2 weeks of the season, 8 and 9 over the last two. I do like his receptions and yards in this game. The yards, especially at 27.5. You can see the Bucs against tight ends. They're 12th overall limiting receiving yards, 18th though to the tight end, which goes to continue to the fact that the middle of the field is a lot more open against this Falcons defense, which is where Cade Otton is going to run the majority of his routes. Looking at Rachaad White now, I do think his receiving yards are playable, but you can see they've gone up, opened at about 19.5 over here, up to 22.5 now. And although it's still a really good look against a team that is giving up a ton of receiving yards and receptions rather to the running back, like we said, not very many yards. If you're going to bet on Rachaad White, I think the look is for his receptions, not for his receiving yards. That said, the thing that scares me about him is looking at his snap share recently against Bucky Irving, who's coming in as the main rusher for this team now. So if we go over to playerprofiler.com, also link in the description, super helpful, you can see we pull up Rachaad White, and if we go to the game log and look at snap share, it's kind of dwindled in this last game. I will say, keep in mind, in this last game, they were winning a ton, and Bucky Irving has clearly been dubbed the lead rusher for this squad. Rachaad White, when they need a little bit more of the receptions. They split the carries in this last game, and Bucky Irving obviously ate a bunch into this snap share, getting close to 41% of the snap share in the last game, in part because, once again, they were running the ball. You see against Denver, really high snap share still in the works for Rachaad White because they were throwing a lot more, needed to kind of try to come back in the game that they lost to Bo Nix and company. So it kind of comes down to game flow here and game script. Do you think this Bucs team is winning a lot, in which case Bucky Irving is going to be out there a lot more? If not, then you do like Rachaad White to be able to get his receptions because he will be on the field. It's just a pretty high number for a guy who only saw a few targets in the last two games, right? 4.5 targets per game in the last two. We need him to get 4 receptions. It's a little bit dicey here with the sort of inconsistencies in these 4 games so far with the amount that he's been targeted. And you can see what I mean here when we talk about Bucky Irving on Outlier.bet. If you look at his rushing yards, he's gotten a lot of the opportunities in the last couple weeks. So on the season, his rushing share has gone up. You can see he had 40% of the rushes in this game, 56% of the rushes against Denver. So that's the key here, is who is getting more of the rushing attempts. And I do think they'll have a decent time running the ball against this Falcons defense, who you can see as the rushing defense gives up the 7th most yards per game on the season, 17th to the running back. But still, this is Bucky Irving's time now at 43.5 yards. If you put him at about 10 or 11 rushing attempts, which is where his rush attempts are listed right here, 10.5 gets you plus money. If he gets the 11 attempts at 4 yards per rush, even, we're talking about 44 yards. So it's right on there. It's pretty fair for him against this Falcons defense. So I'm staying away from Bucky as well, probably, but I'm really interested to see how these two play out because the game script is so important for whether or not they're on the field. Pulling up Tyler Allgeier now, I do think his rushing yards are a good look in this game, more so than anything else. I think Bijan will definitely continue to be used as a rusher, but you can see he is on the injury report with little nicks and bruises. He's been listed as limited in back-to-back practice sessions now, and he also dealt with that shoulder injury before he was cleared to play against the Saints in Week 4. With that in mind, we're on a short week now against with a dude who's been used a ton, with a ton of touches and usage, and he still continues to gobble up all of the snap share for this squad in the backfield. But he has seen his carries given to Tyler Allgeier a decent amount. And for Allgeier, we're talking about 8 rushing attempts per game so far this season, right? You look just on the season, 9, 7, and 8 in the 3 games that he's played this season. And he has gone over the 34.5 where his rushing yards are now in 2 of the 4. That said, I do think we'll see a little bit more work for him this week. Like I said, with Bijan being a little bit more banged up, Allgeier needs to come in. So if you give him 8 rushing attempts, he's at the 40 yards with his 5 yards per rush attempt. That's really, really good. All he needs is 8 carries in this game. I do think he gets the 8 carries. Allgeier's rushing yards are a really good look. Taking a look at Drake London, I have a really interesting play for our guy here, and it's actually something that he's done in 3 straight games. And if you put a same game parlay together for him, you're talking about plus 385 on your money for, once again, something he's done in 3 straight games. And this is one of these negative correlated parlays. And here's where I'm starting to look at it. When I look at receiving yards for wide receivers against the Bucs, 9th fewest. As mentioned already, they close down the play after the reception, so they do give up receptions, but not receiving yards. In terms of receptions, they are 24th on the season, limiting wide receiver receptions. So they give up the receptions, they don't give up long plays or the yards. Drake London has proven to be a lot more of a short yardage guy than Darnell Mooney, for instance. Now, Ray McCloud is the ultimate short yardage guy for this team, but Drake London is not going as deep on his routes as is Darnell Mooney, a lot more of the deep threat to him. If Ray McCloud can't go, we will see Kaderil Hodge. If we see Kaderil Hodge, I think Drake London's in line for even more looks in the middle of the field within 10 yards where you would normally get Ray McCloud playing. So we can parlay his under on the yards and his over on the receptions. And once again, that's something he's done in 3 straight games, 6 receptions in 3 straight games, and under the receiving yards total that he needs in 3 straight games, which if you parlay this with a 70.5 and you go under that number on DraftKings, so you parlay 70.5 receiving yards under for Drake London with 6+ receptions. And now we're talking about something, like I said, that's got a 100% hit rate in the 3 games, 75% on the season after he didn't do it in the first game. But the receptions and the targets are there for our man big time. If you look at his targets in the last 2, 9 and 12 targets in those 2 games after 7 and 3 in the first couple. And it's only been going up. That's a really nice trajectory that we see here as he builds more and more of a rapport with Kirk Cousins. Could he get there on the yards? Yes, he definitely could. It's not the safest play in the world, but for plus 385, this is a really nice negatively correlated parlay. Closing it out with Bijan, because I think we need to at least look at his receiving. When you talk about the receiving yards versus this Bucs team, they are 31st allowing that. We said that, and the receptions, second worst. Only team worse at this, at limiting receiving stuff for the running back, is the Falcons. So if we're going to say Bijan's going to be out there a little bit less than normal because we think Allgeier will pick up some of his carries, we still got to predict how often he is going to be out there. Still looking at a really good snap count, probably like 80%, 75% if he dwindles a little bit. He'll be out there for receiving plays, though, big time. And I do think they're going to look for him. So we've got him at 3.5 receptions, something he's very capable of. He's averaging 4 targets per game on the season, just 1 game so far without getting to that 4 number. So he's averaging the 4 targets. He's averaging about 34 yards as well. I think the receptions are really good, but the receiving yards are probably the best here. You can see the 24.5 rather is a really, really low number that you can take for minus 128, or you can take the 25.5 and get that on a few books at minus 115. I think both are good looks. He's only got to break off 1 or 2, and that should be something that against this Bucs defense, which has continued to give up a ton of stuff to the running back because of the pressure that they bring. This is going to be the best outlet for this Falcons team, especially once again, if Ray McCloud is unable to go. And that is all the time that I have for you guys in this one. Make sure to subscribe to that page. Don't miss any of these videos coming out every time. We have Thursday Night Football and all the Sunday games as well coming out here over the course of the next few days. Also going to be continuing on with the WNBA coverage, so want to make sure you didn't miss that. Made 2.5 units last night there. And the Discord is free right now as well. There's a free access to it if you just want to get in there, see some of the guest cappers who come in and give some really good looks. They're all tracking their stuff as well now as well. So feeling really good about all the conversations we're having in there. If you want to jump in, link is in the description of the video. And until I see y'all next, happy betting.